Good evening, everyone. This week's Parsha is Parsha's Tzav. I'd like to dedicate tonight's class in memory of my mother, Mr. Shalamis Rabinowitz, Shalamis Bas Rav Yaakov Eliezer. So the Parsha reads, Tzav Aaron Mispan Lemar, command Aaron and his son, saying, Zois Torah Sa'ela, this is the law of the Ola, burnt offering, meaning an offering that's completely burned. It is the burnt offering al Moiktal Mizbeach, on the fire all night, on the fire on the altar, Kol Halayla Baker, all night until the morning, Veish HaMizbeach Tukad Bay, and the fire of the altar shall be kept going on it. Now, Rashi comments on the words Tzav, command Aaron and his sons. And Rashi comments, Ein Tzav Lashon Ziruz Miyad Uladoris. When the word Tzav is used, that is an expression of urging for something immediate and for all generations. Hashem is urging Aaron and his sons regarding the carbon oil, regarding this sacrifice of the burnt offering. And then Rashi continues, it's really quoting the Medrash Safra. Omer Rabbi Shimon said, the Torah especially needs to urge in a situation where there is loss of money. So when there's loss of money, so there the Torah has to urge that even though there's loss of money involved, just still make sure you do it. Or still make sure that you do it and do it beziras. Make sure you do it enthusiastically. So it's number one, it's an urging to do it. Even though you may be held back from doing it because of a loss of money, make sure you do it. Now, held back in what sense? Does held back mean you won't do it at all? Good chance what it means is you'll be held back, you won't do it enthusiastically. The commentaries ask, what kind of loss of money we're talking about here? Why is the Kohen, whether it's the immediate Kohanim of Aaron and his sons or future Kohanim, what's the loss of money here? So it's interesting to note that the Gur Aryeh, which is the Maharal's commentary on Rashi, says that he asked the question, what is the loss of money? The Yesh Leimer, and he says the answer is the Shabbat Chasar Kis, there is a loss of money here. Because the divine service is incumbent upon the Kohen, because of that he couldn't do his work. You don't need to have an actual loss. Whenever there's going to be a lacking of money, meaning there's something you lose your money. You had something and you lost it. You never had this money, but that's the point. The point is where he's losing out on a gain of money, that's also called chesaron kis, that's also called the loss of money in this context. So the Gur Aryeh is saying the loss of money here is basically the Kohen has to come to the Beis HaMikdash and do his work. He to do his service rather than the Beis HaMikdash. That means whatever he does for the rest, to support himself, he's got to interrupt. So because he has to interrupt that work, so therefore he's urged on to do it. Now, when I thought about something interesting. I mean, this Gur Aryeh's explanation works well for later generations of Kohanim, but for Aaron and his sons who were in the desert, they didn't have any other work to do. They were supported by the mud. They had their food from heaven. They had the water. They weren't doing anything to have to make a living. So that's a little question of the Gur Aryeh, that it's an interesting explanation to give, but it doesn't really apply. It's not really relevant to Aaron and his sons. And as Rashi says, that Tzav is an urging miyad, immediately and for all generations. Another thing is that it doesn't have any connection to the Ola per se. It's just about, in general, the Avod. I mean, here we're talking about Zos Taras Ola. Command Aaron, this is the law of the Ola. It seems to be something, it would sound like it's something that is relevant to an Ola, while the Gur Aryeh's explanation, it's relevant to all service. Okay, the Sifsei Chachamim, in his commentary on Rashi, says that the loss of money here is, again, not so much a loss of money, but actually no gain. Keben she'ena kohanim nehanim min ha'ola. We're talking about a burnt offering here. Everything's burned. The kohanim don't get anything from it. Elahara oila. One thing is they get the hides. And the only one who gets that one is the Kohen actually does the service. Shemachi nikres gamkin chasarin kis, and therefore it's called a loss of money. Again, it's not an actual loss of money, but the point is there's really no gain here involved. Okay, so what's really interesting about this all is that, again, this is a zirus. This is an urging to Aaron and his sons and all Kohanim for future generations. And according to the Sivsei Chachamim, why are we urging them? Because there's no real gain from it. We're talking about Aaron and his sons. We're talking about great, great people. We're talking about Aaron. We have to urge Aaron to do the service of the Olah and tell him no, and to urge him to do it because he has no gain from it. Does Aaron really care? Does he have to have a gain from the mitzvah, from the avodah divine worship to want to do it? The fact that he has no gain from it makes a difference to him? Can maybe say future generations, perhaps, but Aaron and his sons? That's troubling. But the truth is that it really teaches us a very basic lesson. And that is that as human beings, when we don't have material or physical gain from something, there is a lack of enthusiasm involved. Meaning, my understanding here again is by the fact that there's no gain, then they won't be enthusiastic about doing their avodah. And actually, it's not something like they say, oh, like, why are we doing this? It's something much more subtle. You're not as enthusiastic about it. And we're supposed to do a mitzvah, especially the divine worship in the Beis HaMikdash, with great enthusiasm. And therefore, even Aaron and his sons, it can be very subtle that because there is no material or physical gain, they don't do it with the same enthusiasm. And that can affect any person, no matter how great or small they are. As human beings, they have a certain automatic reaction or a certain lack of reaction, a certain indifference that comes to something that there's no gain, there's no physical material gain. That's just where we are as humans. And in this sense, and in here, it would manifest itself in a lack of enthusiasm for doing the mitzvah. So everybody needs that. Everyone needs that urging. Everyone, because at some level, as a human being, without a gain, physical gain, it can very subtly settle into us a lack of enthusiasm for what we are doing. But again, I think the way to explain this, in the context of Aaron and his sons, is that it's subtle. It's subtle. It's not blatant. Not Aaron and his sons going to say, "Oh, why are we doing this? I'd rather be doing something else." They're not going to be. That's not going to be a reaction. Again, how enthusiastic will it be? And it can be very subtle. The lack of enthusiasm can be very subtle, maybe to a point that a person doesn't even realize it. And therefore, Aaron and his sons are urged by the Olah, where there is no gain except spiritual, that make sure you do it with the full enthusiasm. Be aware of the fact that no matter who you are, you can get cooled down if there's no physical material gain. Now, when we're talking about, let's call it a subtle. So this is an example of how the Yetzer Hara, the inclination, can be can subtly make us, can subtly affect us. Well, lack of enthusiasm is something subtle. And again, for someone as great as Aaron and his sons, it would probably be very subtle, but it's important to be aware of it. So I want to share with you a very interesting story from the Talmud Yerushalmi, from the Jerusalem Talmud. It tells a story of Ma'aseh b'Chassid Echad, a story of a very pious individual. When the Talmud calls someone a chassid, they are extremely pious. Now, there is a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that reads, Al tamin ba'atzmacha ad yom moischa. Do not believe into yourself until the day of your death. And this chassid echad, this pious individual, who is from the times of the Mishnah, the Talmud, he actually was reading it differently. He read it as Al tamin ba'atzmacha ad eis ziknasecha. Don't believe in yourself until your old age. Now, whether he meant that for everybody, just for himself, but that's how he read it. And he was aware of who he was. He was aware of what levels of spirituality he had reached. And he felt that at this point of time in his old age, doesn't have to worry anymore. Doesn't have to worry about anything anymore. You know, he's been a pious individual his whole life. Now he's much older. He's weaker. His physical desires aren't the same. So, you know, you don't have to. You can trust yourself already at a certain stage of old age. Again, especially as someone as himself. Well, in the heavens, they were not pleased with this man's attitude, and they decided to teach him a lesson. And a malach, an angel, was sent down that disguised itself as a very beautiful woman who walked in on this elder. And when the elder picked up his head and he saw her, the Talmud says he spoke with her words that were not appropriate for someone as pious as himself. That's the wording. He spoke with her words that were not appropriate for someone as pious as he. Which means he did not say anything wrong. He did not ask her to do anything. But a pious individual would speak to a woman in a very careful, modest way. And apparently her beauty overcame him, and he did not speak to her in a way that was appropriate for this chesed. Again, doesn't mean he said anything wrong, but he didn't speak in a way that was appropriate for someone who is as pious as him. And he immediately, the Talmud says, he immediately caught himself, and he became so distressed over it that his life was in danger from that stress. So the Talmud says in Shemaim they had mercy on him. They commanded that angel to reveal itself, and the angel told him that the angel was sent down from heaven to teach him. No, that don't read it like you're reading it. Don't believe in yourself until your old age, but not until the day that you die, because even in your old age, the Yetzer Hara is going to slip his way in. And again, in the case of this pious individual, we're not talking about something, vulgar. We're talking about something not appropriate for him. But that's how the Yetzer Hara got in. Subtle. Because if you're not aware, and if a person thinks that at some point in his life or at stage, that his physicality is beyond any kind of challenge or trying to make him stumble, it's a very big mistake. Because for a person as pious as that individual was, a subtle slip up like that was very serious. You see how much it bothered him. And in the case of Aaron, it's lack of enthusiasm. These are important things. They may not be as blatant or as big, whatever the word is, as things that we think about. But again, a lack of enthusiasm is an important thing. And especially for someone like Aaron, who's on a very high level, expectations are high, for him it can be very serious. For this chassid in the story in the Talmud Yerushalmi, for him to speak the way he did was inappropriate for him. That could be serious for him because of the level he's supposed to be on. But again, it happens subtly. It's a subtle way of getting in. The Yetzer Hara gets in subtly because we have inherent human weaknesses that if we're not aware of, he'll slip in something. He'll subtly slip in and make us stumble. Now, in the cases we have here, again, lack of enthusiasm, he didn't speak as appropriately as he should have spoken, which in itself is a problem. But if we're not aware of how the Yetzer Hara, the inclination, gets in on us subtly with something small, then that something small can spiral into something bigger. And I was thinking that we find, going back to Hanukkah, that the commentary of the Bach, Bayis Chadash, on the Torah Shulchan Aruch says that the religious persecution or the taking away of the divine worship of the Beis HaMikdash that the Greeks did to the Jewish people, the Bach says was because hisrashlu ba'aveda. That means they became weak in divine worship. Doesn't mean they stopped doing it, but they became weak, which I was thinking can fit in well, especially the way the Gur Aryeh explained. In the times of the second Beis HaMikdash, the Kohanim, by that point of time, it was like 2 weeks of the year that you have to go and serve in the Beis HaMikdash. That was 2 weeks out of a year out of regular work, 2 years out of making a livelihood. That's something that can affect a person. Perhaps that's what caused the hisrashlos ba'avoda. When they became weak, it's because, they were lackadaisical about it. They were lackadaisical about it. They didn't have enthusiasm about it. Why? What was making that happen? Because 2 weeks out of the year, they had to leave their work. They had to leave everything that was going on and do the avodah. And because of that lack, that chasar and that loss, it ate into them. They weren't working on that. That was the thing that was starting to penetrate into them, and they allowed it to penetrate, and they lost their enthusiasm for the divine worship. When a person realizes that's happening, a person has to do something about that. But they didn't, which means that the divine worship wasn't important enough to them. And therefore Hashem took it away until the Chashmonaim came and were willing to give their lives to have it back. And to show how important it was to them, they brought it back for the Jewish people. But there is this danger for the Kohanim. And in the sense of they have to give up from what they usually do and for the regular gains to do the avodah, there is a danger that can cause a person to lose their enthusiasm to a point that they can become hisrashlu, weak in their worship, that we're talking about a serious problem here. Not a problem that did it reach a problem that they stopped doing it. I don't know if that doesn't say that. But a problem that they could be branded as they're weak. That means their whole attitude is weak. Their whole attitude about divine worship was extremely lacking. But it all because of this. It all becomes because of the fact that as human beings, when we don't have a gain, a material physical gain, we lose interest. We don't have the excitement. We lose interest in that. And that's something that's the lesson here from Rashi to the Kohanim, that the Torah is giving. Tzav, it has to be urged. Because when you, and according to Chacham, it's as far as if I don't gain, according to the Gemara, you're losing out on your livelihood. According to the Simsai Chacham's explanations, you're not gaining. If there's no gain, then already our physicality starts losing its excitement, it's losing interest. And that's something we have to be aware of. Even the greatest person has to be aware that as human beings, this is our reaction when we don't have that physical and material gain. You have to be aware of that and counter that with understanding and develop the enthusiasm and joy that comes with serving Hashem. Okay, the next thing I want to share with you is in the next pasuk. Next pasuk reads, the Kohen shall put on his linen garment and his linen breeches, and he shall lift up the ash that the fire will consume of the burnt offering, and he puts it next to the altar. So the Kohen has a mitzvah that after the carbon is burnt, completely burnt, there's ash there. And the ash has to be removed from the altar and put next to the altar. And then the next step is going to be for a Kohen to take it away, for it to take the ash from the altar at a certain point and put it where all the ash is stored. So the Torah is saying that when you take the ash out of the altar, when the Kohen takes the ash out of the altar, he's wearing his priestly garments. Shmuel B'Chaim points out something very, very interesting. He writes, when it comes to the mitzvah of lifting out the ash, which he calls avodah kala, a light work, meaning not from the most, how do I say it? Far from a glorious job. It's a light work. It's actually what we call a menial task, and it's just taking out the ashes from the altar. Avodah kala, a kind of insignificant, when it comes to levels of the avodah, it's not from the highest levels of the divine worship. Nonetheless, when you do that, even when doing that insignificant job of taking out the ash, he's got to be wearing his priestly garments. Not only when he does the actual service of the carbon does he have to wear his garments, but even when he's just cleaning out the ash from the mizbeach, he should adorn himself in the garments of the Kohen. And this is a lesson in life. That anyone approaches God in any form of worship, or that when he's involved in doing any mitzvah of the Torah, that he beautifies himself, he adorns himself when he does any mitzvah, that he should lower his own honor for the honor of God, even when it comes to doing a very I can't think of the right word, but even doing avodah kala, an insignificant form of service, not from your most glorious, not from your biggest forms of service. So very interesting what he's saying here. He's saying, number one, you do a mitzvah, you dress up, you beautify yourself. Now, it seems like that would make a lot of sense if I'm doing something big. Just doing something small and insignificant, like taking out some ash. One would think that I don't really need to do it for that. And the Torah is saying, no, you should do it for that. But it's interesting that the wording of the Rabbeinu Chai is that one should lower himself, lower his own honor for the honor of Hashem, even when it comes to an avodah kala, a insignificant form of avodah. If I understand it correctly, he seems to be saying that, and again, I don't want to take out, I don't want to make it, I don't want to be disrespectful in any way. But it's like, if I have to sweep the floor and I have to clean out the shul, I have to sweep the floor from the shul of the Beis Medrash, right? So the Torah is saying, you should dress up nicely for it. You should adorn yourself. What are you doing, a mitzvah? But I'm doing something very menial. Right. But you're doing it in honor of Hashem. If you're doing it in honor of Hashem, then this is big. This is not small. This is a big thing. Now, from your own ego, it's not. From your own ego, I should get dressed up, take out the garbage. It's only the garbage. It's only sweeping the floor. It's only cleaning out the ashes. That's if you're into your own honor. That's your ego. But if I go ahead and even for a menial task for a mitzvah, I make a big fuss about that. I make a big fuss about cleaning out the ash, sweeping the floor, and taking out the garbage. I make a fuss about that. So again, a person who is egotistical would like, what are you doing? Why are you making such a fuss about something so little? That's if you're dealing with your own honor. But if you're with the honor of Hashem, then already, even for this, just like anything else, this is a mitzvah. I'm serving Hashem when I do this. I should adorn myself when I'm doing it. I should in an honorable fashion, in a way that shows that I'm proud of it, that this is a big thing. That is the lesson here of the Kohen wearing his big day kahuna, his priestly garments, when he's doing this avodah kala, this menial type work mitzvah. If you're caught up in your own ego, it's like, I just do it. But if you're not, but rather you're focused on the honor of Hashem, then even something like this deserves that you dress up in honor of it. Because any time we do a mitzvah, we should not worry about our honor. The only honor we should worry about is Hashem's honor. And actually, when we do that, that is the true honor that we gain for ourselves. That no matter what it is involved in a mitzvah, that it's a great thing and it deserves the greatest honor and respect and to show it. Because any mitzvah is great, because any mitzvah is the honor to Hashem. And the honor of Hashem is much more part of their own honor. And actually, when we lower our honor for honor of Hashem, that is when one gains true honor. Have a wonderful evening.